Coming up next on Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable, Child Protective Services discovers 6,000 uninvestigated reports of abuse and neglect. Congressman Ron Barber announces that he is running for re-election, and the fight over the use of medical marijuana extracts for children continues. Those stories next on the Journalists Roundtable.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining me tonight are Luigi Del Puerto of the Arizona Capital Times, Howard Fisher of Capital Media Services, and Mike Sunnix of the Phoenix Business Journal. Arizona Child Protective Services is in the news again, this time after the agency discovered that 6,000 calls to the CPS Child Abuse Hotline were essentially ignored?
Ignored, that's right. The CPS revealed this week that between 2009 and now, there had been 6,000 cases that were essentially dropped. Dropped in the sense that they did not even assign them to investigators. This is not a case of caseworkers being overloaded and not being able to get to these cases. It never even got there.
Never got investigated.
Never got investigated.
Yeah, and what happened was they had formed this SWAT team of social workers to kind of take a look at the calls as they came in. These calls, every one of them is logged in. And they went through, and these were supposed to be forwarded to a field office. Then the field supervisor decides priorities 1 through 4, what goes out immediately, what gets handled with a phone call. They removed them from the computer and marked them NI, not for investigation, and simply took them out of the computer system. And the thing is, this was only discovered by accident. This was discovered because they brought in a special investigator for the Office of Child Welfare, and he happened to be, one of his officers was asked about whatever happened to such a case, and he discovers, what's this NI designation? And the more they heard, they found out that of those 6,000, 3,000 of those were since the first of the year.
I thought by statute, every report was supposed to be investigated. What is an NI even doing in there?
Yeah, every report by statute, by law, has to be investigated. Now, tips, like Howie said, they can classify as things that are immediate concern. We got to go check this out immediately, and down the line. So the tips are different than reports and complaints. But yeah, nothing happened. Now compare this to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office out in El Mirage. They got a lot of heat. That was like 400 cases that they had missed. This is 6,000 to show you the magnitude of this. And this agency, it goes back to a lot of their long-term problems of budgets and overwork and understaffed, and the pay that the people get there, it's in the 30,000 range. But it's hard for anybody to do any damage control on this.
And what's interesting about this is when some of us sat down with Clarence Carter yesterday before this CPS committee meeting, and we said, okay, how did this happen? Who's responsible? Well, we're looking at it. This wasn't 1 or 2 rogue employees. It can't be. You can't have something go on for 4 years over different divisions of CPS and not have somebody make it an unofficial policy. Now the question is, the governor, she's saying, I'm not saying I'm getting rid of Clarence, but she's got the Department of Public Safety looking in. She wants to find out, how did this happen? Who ordered this? How did this go on? And how come we only discovered it by accident?
Well, in the past, you've seen these horrific cases where children ended up dying or severely abused. And it was like Howie said, it was like a case-by-case thing. It was missteps. We did this wrong. This is more of a macro thing. You got a lot of Democrats calling for Carter's ouster. Democrats want special session, too.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, 6,000 cases over a 20-month period. That's just there's a fundamental problem within CPS, and it's a system is broken there, and it needs to be fixed.
Okay, so how does it get fixed? I mean, what happens here? The governor's already saying don't blame the money, and yet almost everyone that looks at this says you need more people, and you need people to stay. The turnover is horrendous with that agency.
That's a piece of it, but remember that the legislature last year approved 200 new staffers, including caseworkers. So she's right to the extent that you can't say this is money, because as Luigi pointed out, it's not like the field staffers got and said, I don't have the time, and put it off. This never even got to them. Now, I'm not questioning they don't need more money. The question of how do you fix it? I think that's why you need somebody from the outside, whether it's DPS or somebody else, to look at the system. Clearly, something is wrong with the triage system. Something is wrong with how they prioritize cases, which leads to the horror stories that Mike's talked about of kids that end up dead, and leads to the cases like this where you find out 6,000 cases disappeared.
So does CPS, do you remove CPS from DES? I mean, do you make it its own beast there and try and, has this been a problem for years?
Yeah, like Howie mentioned, if you do a Google search, you'll see reports back from Symington, Hall, Napolitano looking at this problem. You could split it out, and there's arguments for and against that. People have talked about putting these agencies under the state police somehow, and somehow changing the culture there, because you have a lot of social workers there, and sometimes those folks maybe aren't accustomed or geared towards investigations and law enforcement type things.
And that's why they put in the investigator. The Greg McKay, who was the guy who discovered it, that's specifically why the legislature changed the law last year to put in some criminal investigators. He's a homicide investigator by background on loan from Phoenix PD. And there is more of an emphasis on looking at the criminal side.
And Mike might have hit on something here. I mean, there is a culture within CPS, and Detective McKay is from a different culture. So there's one guy who's coming from a completely different background, being essentially loaned to CPS and finding out something like this. And what the fix is, we're not really sure. I mean, there are many ideas. One of them is, as you mentioned, splitting CPS into its own agency. And it remains to be seen if that works too.
But the problem is simply taking it out and putting it over here doesn't solve a systemic problem. You may need to reinvent.
Well,
the agency.
I think that's the idea. You wouldn't just put it as it is into its own agency. You would put it, make it its own agency, and just restructure the whole doggone thing.
Yeah, I mean, I looked on how much these folks make, the caseworkers. It's $35,000 a year. This is similar in a lot of other states. We're not alone. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to leave because of this. There's people that are doing good work over there. They're overwhelmed. They get so much bad press because of things like this, well-deserved, and they're going to have more turnover. And this will have a kind of a numbing effect on families and folks that are going through abuse. Well, it's hard enough to come forward, and you hear this on the news that people call in and nobody listens. So it's a big morale slump for everybody.
The reports are at least somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 uninvestigated, incomplete cases right now. You've just now dumped half as much on that 12,000.
And that
How in the world is that going to get done?
I asked Carter that 3 different times. How are you going to do it? We'll have a plan. How are you going to do it? Trust me, I'm your DES director. I mean, it's to a certain extent what it came down to. When I talked to the governor's office today, they said, look, we'll make the overtime available, but you still only have, look, if they can't keep up with what they've got now, you only got 24 hours in the day. You cannot, can't defy the laws of physics.
And I guess that's why part of the solution would have to be some more funds for CPS and some more resources for CPS. I mean, those two have got to be a part of the mix. You can't solve 6,000 cases or look into 6,000 or even attempt to do it if you're being overburdened even right now.
I know. The one good thing to come out of this is, for years they've had to fight for CPS money. This was a wake-up call. I think that the moment anybody comes in and asks for more money, we won't, there'll be a few people nickel and diming it and, everything else, but I think there's a recognition here that when children are involved, I mean, one of the cases they came across was a kid called in and said, my dad is burning my brother with an iron. Fell into the NI, not investigated category.
That's simply unacceptable. That's not even approaching anywhere near acceptable.
I mean, if you come to think of it, if you look closely into it, this is a state failing to protect its most vulnerable citizens, children who are potentially being abused or being neglected, and that's a huge problem.
Clarence Carr, the quote we were all taking out of all this is when he basically said, "I'm not sure if kids are in harm's way." Is this a former DES director walking right now?
Yeah, he was in D.C. With the district there, with the city government there, and he's with the Bush administration, administering the food stamps before that, and he's coming under a lot of fire for this. They did fess up on this. They did come out and say this happened. They didn't.
Well, wait a second. But he didn't. Again, it wasn't like this was discovered within his agency. It was brought to him by Greg McKay. To answer your question, I would keep the moving van on speed dial.
Well, he's definitely in trouble, but a lot of public officials, both parties, would cover this up. This is really bad. He's probably going to lose his job because of this, and so a lot of folks would have covered this up, and so they at least get credit for doing that. I think the long-term thing is you got to pay these people more that work there. You got to hire more of these people and actually spend money on this. And we're not the only state that suffers from these problems with the CPS type agency,
okay,
but that takes some commitment that we haven't seen for multiple
But
administrations.
I gotta differ with you in the sense that some would have covered it up. He would have. I can't say Clarence. It would have been covered up except for the outsider. It would have. We would never have known. The outsider. If Clarence hadn't come forward, Greg McKay would have come forward. And there's a CPS oversight committee that met yesterday afternoon that if Clarence hadn't come forward with it, Greg would be telling them, here's what's going on. Because Greg owes no loyalty to the organization. So would an agency have fessed up to it? Would we have had a press conference saying, oh, by the way? No, I don't think so.
Last point on this, even Carter said that the governor hit the roof and was very upset about this. This has to be an embarrassment for Governor Brewer with the Republican governors in town.
Let's just say she was giving speeches, some of them in closed-door sessions, about the Arizona comeback and look what we've done and we've been able to do this with a lot less money. And the headline in the morning paper is, oh my God.
That's not the headline you want to see when you're hosting other Republican
We actually
governors.
just had the Apple announcement. That was a huge coup for her and the Commerce Authority, their plant in Mesa. And this obviously overshadows this. And in fairness, this issue, as we've talked about, has gone on throughout a lot of administrations. It's been a problem, but this is especially egregious.
Especially since this is something that's very close to the governor's heart. I mean, she's said time and time again that protecting our children, the most vulnerable, is a priority. And of course, this happens.
But the problem is that everyone, and she has said that, and other governors said that, but the money is never there. The proof is always in the pudding.
All right, we will obviously keep an eye on this. We'll talk about it Monday as well with Senator Bartow. Speaking of kids, there's a 5-year-old who's very much in the news regarding medical marijuana and medical marijuana extracts, and there's a county attorney that says, I understand, I think it might even help you, but it's against the law.
But it's against the law. The problem comes down to a quirk in the 2010 voter-approved law. And I have to admit, I didn't know there was a difference between marijuana and cannabis. To me, it's all the stuff you put in your brownies and smoke or eat or whatever. I wouldn't know anything about that.
Of course.
Anyway, it turns out when they adopted the law, they said you can legally have marijuana, which is the plant, the stems, the seeds, the leaves, the flowers. But there's a separate definition of cannabis, which is an extract. And cannabis was never legalized. Now, the problem in this kid's case is he's suffering from seizures. His mom has figured out that if you give him an extract of a particular chemical that comes out of marijuana, it helps the seizures, number one. Number two, it doesn't have the side effects of making him high. And number three, they don't have to chop up the plant and put it in his applesauce and try to get him to swallow it. All of a sudden, Bill Montgomery starts telling police departments who are asking, well, these extracts being sold at these dispensaries around the state, they're not legal. Dispensary stops selling it. Kid can't get his extract. They sue. Bill Montgomery says to the court, you can't sue me for advising these police departments that way, and they have no right to demand this extract.
There's a lot of case law that needs to be worked out in Arizona and other states on medical marijuana because of the federal law, because of what voters have approved in these various states. So this is one of these cases. And the folks on the legalization side love these cases because you have this sympathetic, ill child here, this medical marijuana, the extracts seem to help him. And so this furthers their cause in the courts to kind of move the puck forward towards more normalization of marijuana.
I understand where the county attorney is coming from when he's saying, I have to enforce the law. This is how I read it, and I have to enforce it. But I think the solution he's offering is a pretty high hurdle. He wants essentially a family to go to the legislature and say, hey, why don't you amend this voter-approved law, get a 3/4 vote, and hope that everybody would agree that this furthers the intent of the proposition. It seems like a pretty high hurdle.
It's certainly in contrast of what the Bush and Obama administrations have done with state medical marijuana laws. They've said, okay, it's still against the federal law. We're not going to go out and prosecute a grandmother or a child like this. We're not going to pursue those cases. So it is an interesting tack to make this the poster child case from Montgomery's perspective.
And going deeper than that, if you actually look at what voters did approve, they said, A, food products are specifically allowed, and B, it mentions preparations.
Yes.
And so the question becomes, if I'm a trial judge and I see that it specifically allows for food products and specifically allows for preparations, how hypersensitive am I going to get? How hyper-technical am I going to get about whether this stuff in a vial that a kid needs is in fact illegal?
Is the county attorney, and Bill Montgomery is considered a rising star in state politics, is he a little tone deaf on this one?
I think he's I'm going to say this in a way he may not like. I think he's a little bit of a Boy Scout. He sees things in very black and white terms. I mean, he doesn't believe the whole medical marijuana law is legal because of the federal law. And he says a strict reading of the law, and he may be right. Now, is it possible? That doesn't mean every prosecutor has to go after every violation of the law. He said, look, I'm not prosecuting these people. I'm not going after them. I'm simply advising police who ask me about the dispensaries, what they can sell and what they cannot sell. And he says, I'm just following the law.
You can kind of see it both ways politically. This could appeal to folks, conservative folks, older folks in Republican primary. If he wants to stay county attorney, there's not much of a Democratic opponent that's going to pop up probably. So he's pretty good. If he wants to run statewide for attorney general or something else where you're dealing with a lot of other voters, then maybe people will hold this against him.
Okay, let's look south here. Ron Barber, apparently it wasn't committing, and now all of a sudden says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for re-election. What was this all about?
So last Sunday, he's spoken to, or last weekend, he'd spoken to one of our reporters, Ben Giles. Ben Giles is in the area working on a story about the race in that district, and Barber told him that I haven't really decided whether I'm seeking re-election or not. I have to go back to my family, ask them whether this is something that they would support. It's the same thing that he exactly said before when he was deciding whether to run for Gabby Gifford's seat. And so, you know, we wrote a story about it, basically saying, hey, this guy who's campaign's been raising funds and has been voting in a way that we think all leads to him, you know, seeking re-election, is actually not really set on running. And so we reported on it, and I think a day after he said, well, okay, I'm running.
Well, what happened in between was all of a sudden the RNCC, Republican National Campaign Committee, puts out a notice saying, well, hey, you know, look, the guy isn't even sure he wants his own seat, and this is one of those toss-up districts. And so, you know, I think, you know, you asked about, you know, some people being tone deaf. I think Ron is a little tone deaf. Ron, you've got to remember, was a staffer for Gabby.
Right.
He's not a politician by background. And rather than answering, you know, my focus is on serving the constituents, I'm leaning toward running. Obviously, you know, there's lots of time for that. I'm here to serve my constituents. He gives the answer of, well, I don't know. And then sort of walks
Ron is
into
in
it.
his 60s, and like how he says he's a staffer. And when you talk to him, he talks actually like a normal person and not like an elected official, like Howie mentioned, the answers that you would get.
Yes.
So it was more of an off-the-cuff, real answer and stuff. That was a tough race last time with him and McSally. He only won by, I think, 2,400
I was
votes in
gonna
the
say.
end. And Republicans are looking at these Arizona seats with Obamacare tanking the way it is and seeing some possibilities there. But Ron is a kind of a moderate Democrat down
How
there.
dare you call him a normal person? I mean, goodness gracious, he's running for Congress, for goodness sake. Let's talk about state legislature, District 21. We've got Rick Murphy out there who's got a variety of problems, and he's an incumbent. Now another Republican in the House is saying, I don't think I'm going to take you on.
Yeah, Representative Debbie Lesko, who is from the same district as Rick Murphy, decided this week that she is going to run for and basically challenge an incumbent party mate because she thinks that seat is going to be vulnerable. It could fall to a Democrat or, her words, a liberal Republican if Rick Murphy ends up being the Republican nominee. And that's because, as we know, Rick Murphy has been struggling with personal woes. He is still being investigated by CPS over child molestation, and you know, his wife had divorced him, filed divorce papers in September. So clearly, this is an incumbent senator that's undergoing a lot of family problems, and she's thinking that we have to keep that seat. And the only way to do it is for me to run for it.
This seat's in Sun City in Peoria. This is the center of Trent Frank's
Yeah,
district. So I don't think we're going to see a
Democrat's
Massachusetts.
yeah,
Elizabeth
yeah.
Warren's not going to walk in and probably win that seat.
Well,
so
well, you have to
she
also-
sees an opportunity.
Yeah.
Murphy's really struggling and probably will not obviously win that. So it's an opportunist thing, but that's what folks that run for office do.
And that's what he said. Murphy told the reporter that, this is a very cold calculation on Representative Lesko's part.
Well, I love the fact that she's talking about liberal Republicans. Look, everybody is to the left of Debbie on a lot of these issues. So, she's an opportunist in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. All politicians are opportunists, but she stuck her finger in the air, felt the wind blowing, and said, I feel a draft.
The last time I checked, I didn't see many Carolyn Allens or Nelson Rockefellers down at the
in that
down at the
particular
legislature
district.
or that district.
So with that in mind, Murphy, with the problems, with the saddle on the back, Lesko with the ambition. Who wins?
Oh, Lesko, I think
You think
easily,
so, huh?
pretty easily in that district.
What do you think,
She's in the
Howie?
primary.
I think it's going to come down to the fundraising. She has, remember, Debbie has catered up, sidled up to the American Legislative Exchange
Yeah,
Council.
we've had her on the show to talk about it.
These are the who's who of special interests. If she needs money, they will find it for her.
You think Lesko would be the favorite in that race?
I would think that Rick Murphy would be going into this campaign if he does end up running for seeking re-election in a disadvantage, and that's simply because he's going through so much right now, and I can't imagine. Let me rephrase it this way: all the things that he's going through right now,
Yes.
all of that will be in a flyer come next year.
Yeah. All right. Real quickly, who's T.J. Shope, and why does he want to mess with things?
T.J. Shope is a freshman Republican from the I can't even say which part of the state.
It's like, is it the Coolidge area?
Coolidge, yeah,
Is it
Coolidge,
Coolidge?
sorry,
All right.
Coolidge area, and he is a freshman lawmaker. And a couple days ago, we had a story about the size of legislative districts, one of the largest in the nation here in Arizona. And he thought, well, maybe we could split the districts, and they split the House districts and carve them into two. You'd still have the same 90 lawmakers.
How many? Look, I've been covering the place since '82, and we've been talking about that. So instead of having just a District 21, we'd have for the Senate District 21A and 21B. Well, if you think there are problems now with redistricting, you carve the district, then what? Then each member has to live in, somebody has got to move? They have been talking about this for years. And on one hand, it makes sense to the extent you've got fewer constituents to report to, but on the other hand, the logistics of the thing and having the redistricting commission come in and carve out essentially 60 districts rather than 30, oh, you're talking real heartburn here.
Gerrymandering is an alienable right of legislatures, and so they have to find ways to do that. And where's Carlton Begay going to fit in with this? He's lived
My
in a
goodness
lot of
gracious.
different
he's-
districts.
Yeah, good. I can't even do the calculus on what that would be. Before we go, this is the 50th anniversary, if you will, of the Kennedy assassination. You gentlemen were not around for that. Some of us were, as young as I possibly was.
Yes.
And there are all sorts of stories of me as a 5-year-old watching the funeral. However, Howie, you were of age to understand what was going on here. Your thought 50 years ago.
It was one of those things. I was 13 at the time, and the first initial reaction, it was the end of the school day, and they announced it over the speakers, a shock. And I spent the weekend in front of the TV. This was pre-Twitter. This was pre-CNN, and having some idiot standing in the street. Well, Tom, there's nothing happening here now. But watching the thoughtful analysis of what had occurred, watching the restraint of the networks. I mean, that's what I'm left with. You had CBS putting an orchestra on the air all weekend. The funeral on Monday is still gives me tingles. The John saluting the casket.
Of everything, as a 5-year-old, that's what I remember.
Yes,
was the funeral.
and that's the thing. And even as a 13-year-old, I had grandparents who died. That was family. This was larger than me, and it struck me as the country mourning.
Very
They
quickly.
were a celebrity family, you know. People loved them, and John and Carolyn, and people. It was the first kind of TV president and stuff. And I remember growing up, my mom told me that I couldn't root for the Dallas Cowboys because that's where Dallas was where Kennedy
Isn't that
was.
something?
And there's a lot of stories you hear from that generation. That is what is associated with Dallas is that assassination.
And I think to a certain generation, yes, you're right. I think Dallas in particular, Texas in general, there is that particular stain that will exist until that generation moves on. Gentlemen, good to have you all here. Thanks for joining us. Monday on Arizona Horizon, State Senator Nancy Barto, co-chair of the CPS Legislative Oversight Committee, will discuss what can be done to get CPS up to any kind of speed, and we'll hear about this year's Spirit of Enterprise Award winners. Those stories Monday, right here on Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.